Hello, and welcome to We Speak CVE, a free podcast from the CVE program. On this podcast, we'll talk with people from the cybersecurity community about what else, cybersecurity and vulnerability management, and the CVE catalog of vulnerabilities. If you didn't know, the CVE program's mission is to identify, define, and catalog publicly disclosed cybersecurity vulnerabilities.
Hello and welcome to the We Speak CVE podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Sabens, a CVE board member. And today I'm excited because we're here talking about the 25th anniversary of the CVE program. I've got some great guests here. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. But we have a really great program. We're going to talk about the history of the program, where we're at today, and we're going to talk a little bit about the future program. So let me say welcome to my guests. And Kent, I'm going to start with you because I know you've been with the program a long time. Would you introduce yourselves and tell us about your background with the program, please?
Sure. First off, thanks for inviting me today, Shannon. I have been with the program since the very beginning, even before it was CVE. There was a small group of, I think initially about 10 or 15 people who started discussing the problem and trying to address it. So I've been involved in the program from the very first meetings. Um, I was at the time working for an intrusion detection company, and we can get into a little history as to why that's important, but it was one of the reasons that helped CVE get an initial footing in there. I've been working on the vendor side of the world, so to speak, in cybersecurity since the beginning of my journey with CVE, and I am a board member as well as a working group chair for the strategic planning working group.
Oh, thank you for joining us. I love having somebody here who's been with the program since its inception, so it's exciting to have you. Alec, would you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi, and thank you as well. It's great to be here. My name's Alec Summers. I am MITRE's CVE and CWE project leader. So I manage the teams at MITRE that help support the CVE program across, vulnerability, weakness, research and analysis, content production, program coordination, services development, and the community engagement. Really, that's the most important driver for these programs across a global partner base comprising industry, government, and academia. So I've been in this position for coming up on a year. A lot of my background has been in helping to shepherd and lead forward the CWE project, and now I'm doing sort of got my foot in both spaces, so to speak. I'm also the moderator for the board and a chair of the TWG. But thanks for having me.
I think to say you've been with us a year is kind of an undersell, like you've been around a long time and have a lot of experience, but formally with us for a year, I guess that's true. Last but not least, Madison.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Madison Oliver. Thank you for having me on the podcast today. I am a senior security manager at GitHub, managing our advisory database and one of our CNAs. And I've been involved in the CVE program since about 2017 when I started interning at my first CNA. I was focused on international vulnerability coordination. I started out, like many folks, I think. I joined all of the working groups, attended everything, and found kind of the right place for myself, for my interest and my skills. So I engage heavily in the automation working group, and I joined the CVE board about a year and a half ago, maybe now, to try and drive some more impact for the open source and the vulnerability management communities that I am very passionate about.
Awesome. Thanks for joining, Madison. So now that the program is 25, what does the board feel like are the key accomplishments and milestones of the program? If we look back at the history, Kent, maybe what do you feel like you're most proud of?
Oh, that it existed 25 years for one. Um, In 1999, we were looking to discuss something like CVE. There really wasn't a common naming convention for vulnerabilities at all. Um, Everything that was done at the time when it came to security, cybersecurity, um, was really focused on the events that were occurring. But the problem was when you have three different products and they don't correlate what the events are, all of a sudden you can drive the response teams into three different events when they're really just the same thing. So the idea was that we really needed to have a convention that we could then alert on a common identifier so that the response teams weren't immediately spinning up three teams because three products came out with three alerts at generally the same time. This was especially important in the intrusion detection space, which was one of the first really big areas that needed to have this kind of consistency and identification. So this was originally envisioned by Steve Christie Coley and Dave Mann in a paper they put out for a conference. They then went along through the vendor community, through SANS, through other areas trying to get interest in this. And it was very quickly accepted as something that was sorely needed. Some of the beginnings of CVE, which is contrary to where we are today, was very, very US centric. It was very, very vendor focused. So we were in a situation where we needed to try to figure this out. And to do so, the original CVE board actually and tested all the candidates that were identified as potential CVEs. Needless to say, they didn't scale very well, very fast. So we decided that we had to change that. One of the, I think, big things from my perspective through the years has been the evolution of the program. And 25 years is a reasonable amount of time for a program to stumble and fail and succeed in many different ways. And we had our fair share, and that's just the way it is. And you go through those growing pains. But from the standpoint of some of the major accomplishments, initially, CVE was limited. We felt that if we had what was that saying that Stephen Northcutt said, when CVE reaches 1,000 entries, it will be a very powerful tool. And that that's we're well past that. The problem was we had limited the format to only 10,000 CVEs a year, which in the beginning felt like more than enough for any future ahead of us in the near term. We wasn't that long before we realized that we were going to have to change our format. There's a lot of formats baked in, and we had two tools and processes that people had, and we had quite an open discussion about how to do it, what to do, and what the format should be. In the end, again, that's one of the big things I come away with is that we have evolved as we go through, and this evolution has helped the program at every step of the way. And from the standpoint of the formats, we have evolved the format to what we have today, which is a JSON 5 kind of format that is much more than just an ID, a identifier, a reference, and a description. So it really has gone from a limited amount of information to a quite a bit of information today.
Where do you feel like we, and I'll open this up to any one of the three of you, but where do you feel like maybe we've stumbled, and or what do you feel most like we as a program have overcome from the inception?
So I'll jump in here. I don't know if I'd characterize it as a stumble, because I think the way that Kent articulated the origins, right, and how it grew, it was only natural that it sort of was going to enter into some growing pains.
Yeah.
the adoption of this, de facto standard for identifying vulnerabilities, started with this idea of, let's say a centralized approach, right? We needed a centralized arbiter for determining what was going to make the list. We needed a centralized arbiter for, all content development. And by content, I mean, the descriptions of these CVEs, the CVE records. We need basically a centralized authority. And so for a while that made sense, but as it grew, as you can imagine, and needed to scale, it simply could not, right? Anything that comes to where we're having, tens of thousands of CVE records, and we have so many partners, interested in getting involved in the program, it simply it cannot operate effectively under a centralized model. And so probably the biggest shift and one of the biggest, hurdles we've had to overcome and carry forward, and we're still sort of, navigating it as we continue to grow and, extend beyond not only just a sort of mature operational program, but grow into even more effective and continued growing program, is to shift from that centralized authority approach to a federated model, which said, okay, we need to, the CVE program governance structure from, the CVE board down needs to federate. The idea that no single organization can handle the entire CVE ID assignment, record publication, and the governance workload meant that we really empowered through the wisdom and sort of problem solving of the board, the CNA community, which has rapidly grown in the last, approaching 10 years, especially, where the CNAs are now empowered to own their own portion of scope within the CVE program. So if you have a vulnerability of a particular, product, it is within this particular CNA scope, and they own the CVE ID assignment and CVE record publication. And we sort of obviously had to mature the program rules around these kinds of things and make sure that we were enabling the rapid and very much necessary requirement to scale this program, right, for it to be effective. And I think when we look back at that, it's not so much a stumbling block, but for sure a major challenge we had to overcome if the program was to survive. And thankfully, we did, and we now have gone from I want to say back in 2016 or so, when this problem was at its height, we had something like 24 CNAs, and now in 2024 we have over 400, and that just speaks to how well this has worked in a strategy. And now we have new challenges to face. So yeah, it's been quite a road.
Yeah, our biggest challenge is also been our biggest opportunity in terms of partnership and federation. Absolutely. How would we describe the state of the program today, and sort of what we have yet to, or that we're still working to overcome as an organization? And I mean, of course, federation and growth remain an opportunity and a challenge. So how would you describe the state of the program today? And I'll open that up to any of you.
I might start myself and then happy to hand it off, because I think this is an important question for different perspectives across the program. From my end, I would say that the program is strong and vibrant. At 25, we have, as we mentioned, the CVE board, but we have 8 working groups working on particular domains of interest and strategic necessities for the program growth and operations. We have 2 top-level routes. We have 5 routes, actually 6 routes now underneath. We operate, as I mentioned, we have over 400 CNAs, across 40 different countries represented. So it's definitely a mature and international program representative of really the biggest and brightest across vulnerability management. In addition to that, we know that downstream CVE information is used across national databases and advisories. We know that it's virtually the sort of backbone of a lot of vulnerability management's ecosystem in the tool vendor community and incident response operations, and other areas as well in terms of research, policymakers, and there's more we can talk about on that. But I think when we look at some of those numbers and we think about it from a 25-year perspective, I'm hesitating to understand or to know or identify another program that has had such a rich history as this one and where we are today. Pausing there, I'm curious, Kent, Madison, what you guys might add.
Let me jump in real quick. First off, I don't want to try to, soften the situation. I do believe that we stumbled. There was some serious issues we had to deal with. But to your point, we couldn't scale. There was no ability to scale when one organization is producing every CVE, and we had a lot of problems trying to establish what CNAs were and who could be a CNA and what the requirements were for CNAs. That was actually quite a big deal when the program converted to allowing CNAs to write their own information into their own CVE records. So the program has done a great deal from the standpoint of evolving to where we're getting to and want to get to. Where we are today, I think, from my perspective, we have some really good, stable practices that I think are helping the vulnerability management community. Initially, there was a lot of resistance to CVE becoming an international, quote unquote, standard, although determination of standards is a common practice as opposed to a standards organization development. But we have established ourselves, as Alec said quite correctly, as the sort of backbone for cybersecurity information sharing. Every advisory, every piece of threat information that comes out, for all intent and purposes, relies on CVEs to assure that A, the right issue is being identified, B, the right mitigations are being discussed, and trying to get those things out. So it's very, very useful from that perspective. The program itself is starting to leverage the community. It's taken a few years, even though we wanted to do this in 2016 and start forward with the first working group being the SPWG. And we envisioned a lot more. You have to get sort of a momentum behind you so that you can get the outside participation besides the CNAs. We have participation in a few of the working groups that are general community participation, not just insider program folks that are participating. There's a rich set of working groups, and we're advancing a lot of those working groups. We're dispelling a lot of the myths that people have. They haven't taken a second look at CVE since 2016-17 timeframe. They really haven't paid attention to it. Well, all the changes that have been going on, and there have been quite a bit of changes, from increased automation to radically modified policies to assure CNAs have control of their own records and their own messaging, to working diligently to improve our relationships with the open source community. And I'll let Madison talk to that. But there's a lot of different things that we have done to get us to this point in time. And I think in a lot of respects, it really has been an evolution, and going forward we're going to see the same kind of evolution. But the key has to be, how are we helping the downstream vulnerability management defenders? How are we helping those that have to protect their organizations and assure that is actually the program's actually being valuable. At this point in time, I think it's being valuable, and we want to continue that for them.
Because the working groups have come up, there's an opportunity to shamelessly plug the working groups, which I'm going to take advantage of. And can't you used an acronym, SPWG. Do you want to tell folks what the 8 working groups are and which are open
But
to
I can talk about the SPWG. The SPWG is it was the first working group, and that is the strategic planning working group. It is a closed working group. In other words, you have to be a part of the program as a CNA or a board member or a moderator or something like that within the program. The reason is there's pre-decisional discussions about what we may want to do, and quite often those discussions don't always, they can go in the wrong direction and we get ourselves back on track, so to speak. So we have pre-decisional discussions that really shouldn't be external to the public. I don't have a list in front of me of all the working groups, but the AWG is our automation working group, where a lot of the CVE services and are designed and developed. Requirements come from the SPWG or the TWG. The tactical working group, that is, I think the AWG is open to anyone. The TWG is supposed to be a chairs working group for tactical operational concerns and issues that have to be addressed. There's an outreach working group for sort of getting the message out, doing blogs and podcasts, just like this one. And then there's an events working group for the things like VulnCon. We had first initial VulnCon last year, where CVE and FIRST organizations worked together to produce a vulnerability management conference focused purely on those things that affect those defenders. And we're doing that again this year. So we have working groups that are in different topics in different areas. There's even a recent as in the last year, created a working group on artificial intelligence. So this is a big area that we're really trying to focus our understanding as to how to address CVEs in an AI environment. So there's a lot of discussions going on there. That's actually open to the public as well. So I'm sure I'm missing a few. Alec?
Yeah,
Madison?
you covered most of them. There are a few more. One is the CNA Organization of Peers, or the COOP or co-op, that meets regularly primarily for CNAs, as you can imagine. So, working through challenges and some questions that they may have in their ongoing operations. There's also the Quality Working Group, which really is focused on identifying areas where, whether it's content, CVE content or rules or best practices need to improve to better support our variety of stakeholder use cases. And I think the most recent one, as you mentioned, I think that last one is the AI working group, which again is, as you mentioned, trying to identify where the sort of guardrails are for CVE ID assignment and AI technologies, respective of things like models versus systems, and identifying where and how the rules can be interpreted for those kinds of decisions. For the most part, we are an open community. For those that are interested, you can go to our website and request to join working groups. As Ken alluded to, there are some that are devoted to existing known partners of the program in some capacity, and others that is not a requirement. So do reach out to us and check it out on the website. There's a sub-menu for working groups if you're interested.
So thanks for indulging the shameless plug, and we hope that you're interested in joining the working groups. I co-chair the Outreach and Communications Working Group, but there are a lot of great working groups depending on what you're interested in. And again, some of those welcome the general public. So, if you want to participate, reach out. So there's something else that we mentioned is downstream data and the CVE data being the backbone of vulnerability management in this space. And in terms of CVE as the source of truth in so many ways, where should people go to seek the source of truth? And what would you want to tell people about the current state of CVE data? And you mentioned quality and the quality working group. So maybe we should talk a little bit about that today.
Sure, absolutely. So what I will say is that CVE, the CVE program, the CVE list is really the primary source for vulnerability information, especially with respect to these various scopes of the CNAs, 400 plus that participate in the program. So if you are looking for the best and most complete information and accurate information related to CVE, you want to come to CVE. What I will say is that there are many downstream partners that historically have been important players in terms of enriching information within CVE information that is created and published by the CVE program. There's been a bit of a tide shift in that the CVE program in and of itself has launched an initiative to encourage and empower CNAs to be able to provide additional information to the record directly to the CVE program, so that we don't need to wait or trust a sort of downstream third party to add information that is grown to be of interest to cybersecurity professionals, in terms of incident response or product security, incident response and things like CVSS is that CWE mapping, root cause analysis, KEV tags associated with known exploited vulnerabilities, software identity identifiers. These kinds of things are now supported within the CVE record and are being added routinely now by many, many, many CNAs. All that being said, we are actively and ongoing, trying to find ways of better serving our downstream users. So finding ways to facilitate better engagement with our information in an automated and routine way. So there's some paths forward still to tread there, but really this is the place to come for CVE information.
So let me jump in real quick, because I do want to sort of expand on what was just said. The CVE program for many years did not, at least first 16 to 20 years, did not have the capabilities to collect information from the CNAs themselves. The stuff that we received was, for the most part, very minimal. And there were third-party downstream, like the NVD, that were adding CVSS scores, that were adding CWE determinations, that were enriching the data in a way that was beneficial to the community. Recently, and I say recently as in the last couple of years, and not recently as in 25 years ago, but in the last couple of years, we have shifted within the CVE program to believe that the best source of data is the originator of that data. In other words, if a vendor has a product and it has a problem, and they put out a security advisory on it, and they describe what the problem is, they issue CVSS scores at that time, and they also issue additional information, or have the potential to issue additional information and publish it into the CVE record. So the new formats that we've talked about and we put in place, JSON 5, that has got a lot of, or the CVE record as we call it now, but it's based on JSON, allows the the CNAs to publish a great deal of information into the CVE record itself. So this is not your 3-item kind of CVE record of the past. And most people remember, with an ID and a reference and a description. This is very much a great deal of information, and the board and the program have encouraged the CNAs to and incentivized them using information, but have encouraged the CNAs to put this information in at the time they publish the record instead of having some downstream environment do it for them. In the case of CVSS, it's sort of a complicated issue. We have multiple CVSS scores that people are using in the community, and some that they want to be using, but it's too complicated and causing issues and the like. But the reality is here, when we start talking about what we're putting in our records from the CVE perspective, it is as much data as the CNAs can provide right away, and does not have to be reevaluated or enriched by others, as long as they're, like in the case of Microsoft, they're putting in a massive amount of information, including CPEs, the Common Platform enumerations. So this is a lot of information that has not been available in the past, that is in the kind of timely and nearly complete as it can be. But it's coming directly from the source. And I think the key here is that CVE truly is that aggregation point directly from the CNAs, where that information is being made to the downstream community.
All great points, Kent. Thank you. I want to turn to kind of an adjacent point, you guys, and kind of bring Madison in here too. My next natural question would have been, how are we attracting participation today? And so I kind of want to get to also touch on open source issues and involvement, and maybe even potentially, we've talked a lot about CNAs, maybe also potentially research engagement. So I want to turn to Madison on those topics.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue, because I wanted to follow up with what Kent said, because I completely agree. I think the increased transparency of vulnerability data and the openness of the CVE program has been one of the most impactful, beneficial changes that I've seen over the years, at least. And moving to software owners as the source of the data, or the data creators, I think has been an absolutely fantastic move. But when you don't know who owns the software, we're effectively back at square one. And in the world of open source, finding out who actually owns software can be extremely difficult. Can be even more difficult when it gets into closed source too. So the open source community has historically had some what I'll call, I personally think, valid complaints. They often don't feel well represented in the community. And again, right, that can come down to finding out who actually owns the software, who is the person that does need to be represented, or the group that needs to be represented, can be very difficult. But one metric I want to share from last year that I think is really, really interesting and really goes to show the impact of the changes that we're trying to drive, especially for open source, that last year in 2024, the top 5 highest producing CNAs were specifically established to report on CVEs for and about open source projects. And that includes my own CNA at GitHub. We assign on behalf of maintainers on our platform. So the fact that some of the 5 of the highest producing CNAs behind the Secretariat themselves are focused on open source software, I think it's really, really impressive and really amazing. I think they accounted for almost 44% of the CVEs last year. So that shows me that we have made, I'll say, significant strides in engaging the open source community. On the flip side of that, right, the open source isn't a real thing. There is no one open source, right? So while we have done, in my opinion, a great job of engaging, let's say, those 5 CNAs, well, 5 CNAs doesn't cover the entire open source community by any means. So I think there is still a lot of room there for us to engage various communities, other working groups, especially internationally, to ensure that these folks feel well represented, that they can engage in the community should they need to, and also just make them aware that if they do not want to engage in the community, they're unable to, maybe they don't have the resources, the funding, the understanding, that they can still participate in this by using a CNA, whether it be MITRE, Red Hat is the open source, top level, or Root CNA, GitHub. There are a number of other ways that they can engage with the community as well from a less resource intensive perspective, I'll say.
Thank you. Anybody want to add to that before we kind of go on to where we're going and talk about the future?
Sure. Just as a step in the right direction, Madison was a breath of fresh air when she came onto the board. She has, as she's very humbly talked about, some history in this space, and it has been very beneficial. Sometimes you find a diamond in the rough, and I mean that in the most
Or just a
positive way.
diamond.
Yeah, or just a diamond. Yeah. But it wasn't expected that we would have the kind of great advice and the like coming to the board and that we've had. And I think in a lot of respects, bringing in the right groups of people to the program, whether it's on the working group or on the board, is really important. Having that kind of perspective, that kind of open dialogue, that kind of responses to how we can improve the program is, again, it's another form of evolution. But we have been evolving, not only our services, not only our formats, but also our approach to leadership in the program. And I just want to compliment Madison for coming in when she did, because she did help the program, no question.
I totally agree. Love it.
Oh, thank you both. I appreciate that. Happy to help and represent what I will, for the last time, call the open source. But as always, right, and I'm the first person to say this, I am not the only one by any means. So I look forward to maybe championing and getting more engagement, more involvement, across the very broad community that is open source and vulnerability management.
Yep.
So let's talk about where we see the program in 1 year, in 5 years. Talk to us about what's next.
Well, before Alex starts, I'd just like to say I wish we could put this program out of its misery completely and not have to have a CVE program identifying vulnerabilities in software. That's a lofty goal, and one day maybe we will truly secure the internet. But until then, we're going to have to figure out how to keep adding value. And I think that's the biggest thing that I would like to achieve or see achieved by this program. I'm not going to be spending another 25 years here, I assure you. But and only because of age and health as opposed to anything else. But the reality is that we are making some strides, and with the enriched information, we're getting to the point where we can potentially allow new and different types of tools to be developed. If you think about CVSS has always been the score that everybody uses. Well, we have a couple different versions of CVSS now, and vector information is very, very critical and important. But we also have TEV. So now we're starting to see what's really out there. We have other types of scoring mechanisms like SSVC, which is an attribute-based scoring system. So having this additional type of information incorporated in the CVE record allows for the production of things that we really sort of need more in the vulnerability space than we have today. And that's really prioritizing mitigation. Being able to take different scoring systems, weighing those scoring systems against your internal assets and your internal critical assets, and understanding what the real risk to your systems are is very important. And I don't expect it to be too long before somebody catches on to the idea that they can put together a real risk-based mitigation prioritization system using CVE data from this different types of sources.
Yeah, I'll jump in and just say I share Kent's lofty ambition to kill the CVE program once and for all. but perhaps not really in the meantime. I think it has a long way to go and bring value in managing risk across the community. We do have some challenges, absolutely, and some opportunities to face as this program grows into its next, I don't know. You mentioned 5, 10 years, 1 year, 5 year, 20, next 25 years, who knows? Kent, I think, hit the nail on the head in terms of increasing the value of the CVE records in various ways. We're working those areas and we're seeing adoption throughout the community for providing further valuable information to their records. This notion of quality as well, reviewing what quality means within a CVE context after 25 years, as we add these elements of additional information, enrichment information. What does quality look like in terms of expectations for, the accuracy of and completeness of things that are just foundational to the program, descriptions, the kind of information that's expected in a complete CVE record. These kinds of things are changing and are exciting challenges as we see people take them on. I think a couple other things that we've talked about recently too have also been continuing to broaden the organizational diversity within the CNA community. So, starting to engage, different areas of industry, even outside of cybersecurity, but are starting to have, not starting, realistically have, cyber risk associated with them. Automotive, financial services, IoT, medical devices, a lot of these areas where, as we continue to onboard new partners, we maybe want to build relationships there. And of course, Madison mentioned open source, where we have made some great strides, but there's a lot more to do. And then lastly, I'll just say one thing that we've been discussing recently as well is strengthening the connection between the program itself and its downstream data consumers, right? Better understanding their needs, better fulfilling their needs from a program perspective. These are all things that we take very seriously as we want to continue to expand and strengthen this program and its value to its vast stakeholder community.
I'd probably like to follow up and just triple down on the data quality as another area for us to continue improving in. When I think of my own vulnerability database, I like to think of it in terms of data quality and data quantity. So if I think of it in terms of CVE, data quantity is maybe just the availability of the data in the CVE list, which is, problem number one, whole reason the list exists in the first place. So I'd maybe make an argument that I think that we've reached a fair point with 40,000 plus CVEs that were published last year alone, right? That we've made pretty good strides in the data quantity and discoverability or availability of vulnerability data problem, while at the same time we have to maintain or even ideally increase the quality of the data while increasing this quantity. And so we've gotten to a point, especially with the federation of the program, which again, I think is an absolutely amazing move. We've gotten to a point where I think we're pretty good on quantity, but there's a lot I think we could do with quality. And we've maybe let some of that slide as, the quantity has increased, I'll say, rather dramatically, at least since 2016, 2017, probably more than folks even thought was going to happen. So in that process, I think we may have lost some things as far as quality goes, or have had some trouble in keeping up with it. But that's an area that I know we have been focusing on a lot, and I think we will have to continue to, just for the sake of quantity alone, because that doesn't seem to be lessening. That is only going to continue. So as we have this just deluge of vulnerability data, ensuring that the data itself is quality, is good data, is usable data, has fields that folks can use to prioritize, to filter, whatever it is that they need, will help us ensure that we're maintaining quality of the data and usability of the data for downstream consumers, while continuing to maintain quantity, which I'll call for the moment. I think we did pretty good on that, at least.
But I must admit, we've come a long way from the text entries of the original CVEs, that's for sure.
Oh, goodness, yes. Sure. I could not agree more. And that is, this is not to say that we have not come leagues and bounds already. We absolutely have. But, we're not done yet.
You guys, I think we're running out of time here, but this was fantastic having you on the program. If you want to get any parting words, I welcome you to do so. Otherwise, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and really appreciate it. And thank you for all the hard work that you're doing. And yeah,
I
that's it.
might plug one thing, Shannon, since
Please.
we have the time, and that is our 25th anniversary report.
Ooh, yes, please
So we
do.
did publish back in October of 2024, which isn't too long ago. If you haven't had a chance to take a look and you're hearing this, please do take a look. If you go to the CVE.org website, there's a couple ways to find it. Right in the middle there where it says Learn, there's a link directly to the 25th anniversary report. And there's a lot of information in there. Some of the stuff we talked about today, but a lot that we didn't. And really great to look through. And for those of you that have been around for a long time working with CVE, information. There's a lot of historical information and sort of program history and growth, all the way up to where we are today and some of the new challenges we're facing. So I just wanted to take a moment to plug that as well.
Yeah, and I just like to say, first off, thanks for having me today. But at the same time, when we're talking about CVE, I have had too many conversations with folks who've sort of come in, take a look at the program at certain points in time over the last 25 years, and they really, don't keep up with things that are occurring. And right now, things are happening much faster than they've ever happened before. We have format additions, new schema additions. We have more information that's available to the downstream users of CVE. We have services that we're building up around it. There's a lot of things going on, and it's real positive for our future. And so what I would encourage folks to do is keep an eye on it, keep coming back and paying attention to what we're really doing, because you may be able to benefit in your organization from it.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Shannon. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you for joining us today on the We Speak CVE podcast, which is available for free on Buzzsprout and the CVE website. If you'd like to participate or suggest a topic, please contact us on the CVE website.